is a group where we will never try to sell you anything. I don't invite people on who are going to try to sell you services or products or things like that. It's a platform agnostic group. We talk mostly, we don't want to be beholden to any vendor or anything like that. So we are platform agnostic, and because we all know that we work on all kinds of systems and in all kinds of environments everywhere. Like Sydney said, this is a discussion. This is not death by PowerPoint. None of us have a PowerPoint, okay? So you will not be seeing a bunch of slides. We're just gonna be talking. I'm gonna be asking a lot of questions of my guests today. And for those of you who I don't know, which I'm looking, and I don't know hardly anybody on this one. I'm Kelly Jo Horton, and I'm the principal engineer for marketing operations and technology at Room in New York City, but I work out of Bend, Oregon. So, and I've got 3 guests today. Today's topic is about hiring in the MOPs world. And I have 3 hiring managers on the session this morning, and I'm going to have them quickly introduce themselves and just say where they work and who they are. Okay, Michael, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Michael Hartman here. I'm in Dallas, and I'm looking here. I promise that the 3 of us did not plan on wearing shirts that are almost identical. But I have been in marketing, marketing ops for a number of years, most recently at Freeman, where I was director of demand gen and helped implement a program there using Marketo and a few other things. But previously I've worked in Eloqua. So like Kelly Jo said, I am agnostic personally about technology as well. So I'm a big believer that process leads to the technology, and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, Zach.
Hi, I'm Zach Belois. I work at a company called Jellyvision. We're based in Chicago, and we are a benefits education and benefits decision support software company in the B2B software space. I am the director of marketing, technology, and automation, which is kind of the functional head of our revenue operations group at Jellyvision. I have had a lot of marketing experience that kind of led to this larger revenue umbrella. Kind of came up as a digital marketing manager, went through the demand gen space, and kept finding myself gravitating to marketing operations until I got to Jellyvision, where I got exposed to kind of the sales ops side of things too. So now I have a little bit of both sides there, as well as some business intelligence experience.
And last but not least, I have Akil.
Hey guys, I'm Akil. I lead the marketing operations team at a telecommunications company called Spirent. I just joined a couple months ago, and prior to that, I led the marketing operations team at Cvent, which is a event software company in the DC area where I am. So I've been in the marketing operations realm for about 6 to 7 years, in B2B marketing for almost 8 or 9. So excited to talk to you guys.
So I heard a couple of you, before I get into the first questions, by the way, we've got questions that came in from the registration. So I'm definitely going to go through some of those, and then we'll open it up. You guys can comment or jump in whenever you want. I did hear you say that you're part of a team. Are you not a team of one? How lucky are you? Are you guys you have teams, it sounds like.
We do.
Lucky, yeah. Small teams, but teams for sure.
That's why we have them on here, because they're hiring managers. Okay, so the first question I have is that there have been people who join these calls who do not, you hear people talking about MOPs and marketing operations all the time. I'm going to ask you to explain it in layman's terms, not to someone like me or Sydney or somebody else, because we all know what it is. It can be so many things. But what I want to know is, if you were at a family reunion and there's your grandma there with her macaroni salad and her barbecue chicken or whatever you want to have at your family reunion picnic, your cousin over here is an accountant. Grandma says, "What do you do?" "I don't know what you do." What kind of job do you have?" "Oh, I'm an accountant." And everybody knows what an accountant is, and there's no more explanation needed. So I'm going to go with Zach. What are you going to tell Grandma? What do you do for a living?
Oh, all right. So this is what I always tell my family, and it's partially because my family likes to joke around a bit. But I always say that we maintain the robots that tell you about our company.
Okay, all right. And what about you, Akil?
I try to explain it as saying that I basically help other people do their jobs by setting up the systems and processes and help them do more with less. And usually that helps people understand a little bit better.
Okay. Anything else? What are you gonna tell Grandma, Michael?
Well, so it's funny that you brought up accounting, and everybody knows what accounting is because I've done work with accountants, and
So you
they
just
all
lie.
have.
You just lie and tell Grandma you're an accountant, and then let her.
No, what I would do is say, yeah, if you know understand accounting, right? They're not over there like keeping handwritten stuff in a ledger, right? Anymore. They're using technology and systems and things to make their job
Ah,
easier, scalable. Marketing has the same kind of problem, and that's what we do. We help them.
yeah. I usually say that I make all of the marketing and sales people's dreams come true, and I make their job easier. And if it's somebody who really, really doesn't understand it, I talk about email because everybody knows what email is usually, even though that is not the core of my job at all. But I can't explain the rest of the stuff to someone who really doesn't understand digital marketing in general or marketing operations. So this these sessions today are focused on hiring. We have a lot of people, I don't know how many actually, who have been laid off during the pandemic. And I've also noticed a lot of people hiring during the pandemic. So we're going to get started with the questions that are very specific to career here. So when you're screening for a candidate, let's start with somebody who's going to be a team of one. Okay, because there's a big difference when you have a team and you're hiring for some narrowly focused position. And if someone's a team of one, are certifications important for any of the platforms?
You want me to go first because I have strong opinions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually don't think that's important. I think experience and an ability to learn and liking to solve problems are way more important than having any particular certification. I'm not saying it hurts, right? And maybe all things being equal, that might tip the scale for someone. But for me, I've just seen, honestly, it started way back in my days when I was doing project management, program management. Saw people who were PMI certified or something like that who really were not effective project managers, but other people who didn't have certifications that were way better. And so, yeah, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, and I don't discourage people who've worked for me to go pursue them. I think it's a good thing and it's nice to have. And there are a lot of people who pay more attention to it. For me, it's it doesn't really make it all that much difference from my perspective.
Yeah,
What
I
about
agree
you?
with that, Michael. I don't look for certain certifications. I think that they're great if they include them on the resume because that shows that you're excited to learn. But there's a lot of other questions through the interview process that you can ask to assess somebody's ability to learn and quickly pick up things, which I think are really the core of what those certifications show and really what I'm looking for.
Okay.
And I'll just tack on here and be brief that I think certifications are pure value add, and they show an individual has taken the time to achieve something, right? Which I don't think should be, if I'm looking at someone's resume, I'm like, okay, they sought this out, right? It's not something that was given to them by what they had in their experience. This was added on top. And that's important to me. It's not the end all be all. It wouldn't be in my job requirements. And then on the side, in terms of like hiring, what I'm looking for is beyond that, is saying, okay, if you're a person of one, what have you built, right? Because you're going to be doing a lot of building as an individual.
Right. That's true. So you mentioned, let's just talk a little bit about a resume. I know you only have, if you get a lot of candidates, you only have a few seconds, right, to actually weed people out. What is let's talk about the thing that if you encountered it in the top third of the first page would absolutely weed somebody out immediately. Do you have any any like a red flag thing that would show up on the top of a resume that would just tell you this is the wrong person for this job? And I've stumped the panel already. Anybody?
For me, it's less about things that I try to look for as red flags, but I think like the most important sections are to show, like in your experience, being brief in the types of responsibilities that you've taken on throughout your career, and making sure that each one of those is a distinct value add rather than, you know, being repetitive and going into too much detail, and showing what skills you have, the technology that you've worked with, and some examples of awards or recognition that you might have. I think those are 3 areas that I really look for, but not necessarily deal breakers if they didn't, you know, have a job that recognized them in a way that they could add something to their resume, or certain technology that I was looking for. Just, you know, those are things that I keep an eye out for.
That's a good point, and I'll ask you, the rest of you too. So as we all know, marketing operations jobs, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of platforms and tools and everything out there. So you see I've seen job descriptions that actually don't list any tools at all, and you kind of just don't know. It's like, oh, you got to have marketing operation experience. We want some sort of CRM. And then you see the ones that list like 10 different tools. What if I, you know, have experience with Microsoft Dynamics, but not Salesforce, or I have Pardot and Eloqua, but not Marketo, but you want a Marketo, Microsoft, or Salesforce, or the combination that I have is not exactly what you're looking for. Should I still apply for that job?
I say yes, personally, because I'm going to speak personally for myself here. Like, I've tried to strive in my career to not be beholden to 1 or 2 technologies that define what I do. And there's a few reasons for that, right? First of all, technologies can kind of fall out of favor very quickly, and then all of a sudden your skill set can immediately become obsolete. Secondarily, is I want someone who is versatile, and I want to be versatile myself, regardless of the name or the logo that's on the technology, because there are times for a million reasons that we either switch or bring on new technologies. So if someone's stuck and I'm a Marketo person or I'm an Eloqua person, and then we say, well, okay, but we have to change contracts for XYZ, then all of a sudden if they're saying, well, I can't work here anymore, that's a problem, right? And we need people who are flexible and are kind of driven by something beyond what that particular technology is, in terms of being able to meet our greatest potential.
How do you guys feel about that? Either Akil or...
Yeah, so real quick, go back to your previous question. The thing that would stand out to me is like poor spelling and grammar. I think it's similar to Akil. I mean, it's not like the stuff that they list, but it on their resume. But are they paying attention to details, and can they communicate effectively?
We all
those
know
would be
it's a very detail-oriented job, and you really want
yeah.
somebody who's almost a perfectionist for detail, right?
Yep. So in terms of yeah, like I said, I've worked in multiple platforms, and I think like Zach, right? I don't think of myself as a specific technology expert. And in fact, I probably wouldn't, like, if somebody was really, I tell people now, because I'm looking too, but I tell people, if you're looking for someone who is an expert in Marketo, I'm not the person. If you need somebody who can help you understand how does Marketo or Eloqua or Pardot or whatever work within the way you're going to market, then someone like me can play a role. And I think I am more interested in people who can apply the technology and use it in a way that makes it most effective to solve the business problem of going to market, especially in a complex B2B world, complex B2B sale, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I actually just recorded a podcast with somebody talking about how there's this notion of best practices. And I think a lot of people think you can take what you've done in one place and just drop it in and do it somewhere else. And I don't think that's the case. And so to be able to do that, you need people who can think about how to solve these problems in different ways based on the experience that they've had with whatever technologies or other systems.
We've all had that experience of someone who comes in and says, well, this is the way we did it at XYZ, and they want to do
Right.
everything the exact same way. Since I don't know the three of you actually, I don't even know if we've met in person at conferences or anything. Are you all B2B, or is anybody in here B2C?
B2B. And
B2B.
I think kind of to tack onto Michael's point, we're all B2B. I work at a company with 350 people, right? And so there's also, to kind of extend on that last question, the specificity of a job changes big time if you're at a larger company than at
Yes.
350 or below, right? And so that kind of influenced my answer a little bit too, because I'm thinking in the context of who am I hiring for my team. We need folks that have that kind of variability and flexibility, but there might be times when a company's like, we're a Marketo shop and we have been, and you're going to work in Marketo, right? And then
You're not switching.
yeah. And so then all of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe it's good to have that specificity. That just popped in my head as Michael was talking. Like,
Right.
there's a sliding
But you're
scale.
kind of looking for a Swiss Army knife person most of the time, right? As long as they have the blades that cut and the little scissors that cut, it doesn't matter what you're cutting, right? So, how about, I would love to know about the jobs that are listed. I have seen everybody looking for the mythical unicorn all the time. And I think those job listings are super intimidating. When somebody puts a job description that says you need to be a paid media expert, you need to know marketing automation, you're going to be writing emails, you're going to be building landing page templates and email templates, and we would also like you to know how to integrate all these platforms, and you have to know the CRM and all this stuff, right? They want everybody. I've seen these job descriptions that are this mythical unicorn, right? So does that mythical unicorn person exist? Have you ever interviewed one?
They don't exist. So I think that that's a great point. Like when we're writing job descriptions, we're basically trying to, in marketing operations, you're trying to solve a lot of problems. So there's a lot of area and ground to cover. But in writing all those things out, I think it's weeding out or identifying people that apply that are willing to expand in those areas or can see themselves being, agile and versatile in their, experience. It's not that they've necessarily done all those things that are experts in digital and copywriting and integrations and can code as well. It's just that if people are applying and seeing all those things, it shows that they are willing to expand their horizons, willing to learn. And so I think that that's a really important quality.
You hear that? Everyone on the call, they're saying apply anyway. Even if you're not the unicorn, apply. You guys have anything to add, Zach? You were going to say something?
Yeah, and I think job descriptions have become this like top line negotiation process where it's like, actually like this, if we could create somebody in, a machine and they'd pop out and they'd have all these qualities. And in reality, maybe you have 7 of the 10. And that's actually kind of what we're looking for. But we're going to list a bunch of things that are kind of our ideal for the challenges we're trying to solve for the business. And I think the challenge is that it's swung so far that direction that it becomes incredibly intimidating for someone who's applying. Mm-hmm. And so as a hiring manager, I try to think about if I sat down and read this, like, would I be excited or would I say, oh no, this title sounds great, but then I read this job description and this sounds,
You're thinking I'm going to be incredibly busy.
This is a 90-hour week.
They're out of their mind, right?
And so that's a tightrope walk, and I think it's an area that needs to be drawn back a little bit in terms of how people are writing job descriptions. Because I do like aspirational job descriptions. I like kind of writing it where you see somebody maybe in a year or two as opposed to where they walk in day one. But there is some challenge in terms of actually potentially, like Akil said, weeding too many people out because of how stringent or how thorough the requirements.
So you're actually trying to look for confidence and weed out everyone else.
Yeah, but how do you thread that needle? Yeah.
Often it's like, you're not asking for Often when I've written job descriptions, it's for a very specific use case. There's been use cases where I needed somebody who's really going to focus on project management and being able to be like a traffic cop for campaigns. Another one was a marketing technologist, and those were written very differently. And you're going to include some of the more, administrative aspects of that job in addition to more of those hard skills that you'll need to look for, because in marketing operations your job changes every day, every quarter. Like it's never the same, and so you need somebody who can like meet those waves and ride those waves through the job with you.
Yeah. And here's another thing I've noticed too, right? And this is both from me writing them and having read job descriptions in the past, is you can usually tell if the person that wrote it did the job by how thorough it is, right? If I'm going to go write like a marketing ops job description, I can be pretty thorough. But we also hired a data analyst recently, and that's not my pure background, right? It got into a lot into data warehousing and BI tools and stuff like that, which I'm familiar with at a top level, but I don't have as much hands-on experience with. And so our job description, I felt like, was very different in terms of what we asked for there, because I didn't have as much background. I had a kind of vision that was being portrayed through the job description, as opposed to here's how you're exactly going to come in, right? And because of that, we hired on that vision, and someone had to kind of help me fill the gaps in the interview of what I frankly didn't know. And so as you read between the lines of when you read these job descriptions, feel that out, right? Because it might change on what you're looking for in a job. Are you looking for someone who's super kind of mentor and can help guide and understand because they've walked that path? Or are you looking for something that you can carve out for yourself, that is a new thing at a company or a new thing within a department?
Yeah. I want to read one of the comments that I see over here first. So from Case, I'm glad this is about the mythical unicorn job descriptions. This is from Case. I'm glad you brought this up, Kelly, because when I see job descriptions like that you just described, I immediately assume I'm unqualified if I don't have nearly all the skills they're looking for. So what everyone has said is that's an aspiration. And I suggest when I write job descriptions, I actually put must-haves, nice to haves, because there are some things, it depends on if the role is, if you're a team of one, there are some must-haves. If you're going to own a platform, you need to have that experience. But if you're on a team of many, you have this great mentoring and training opportunity around you, hopefully with other experts in the group, and it makes it a different environment to walk into. So on that note, if we have people on here that are, people want to get into this career, I get that question all the time, and I encourage people to do it. There's so many different jobs within marketing operations and different specialties, that there's something for everybody. So if somebody's new, green, either out of college or switching careers from something else, what do you guys think is like a good entry level? Like what kind of job should they be looking for? What kind of company? Or do you have any advice for people who are just trying to switch careers or brand new trying to get into this?
So I think those are two very different things. So I would say if you're just getting out of college and you think you want to go into a role that would lead to marketing operations or marketing tech, I think starting, Zach mentioned he had been in digital marketing and grew up there. I grew up in IT management consulting, and I think those disciplines where you're having to think about how do you make these things work and scale, whether some sort of job where you're having to go through that process of understanding how does a business operate in some form, and then how do you make it operate more efficiently with the use of technology. Any of those I think could lead to marketing operations and marketing tech. I'm not sure that, I think it would probably be less likely to be someone who's got a creative bent, the traditional marketing creative bent moving over. That's where I think you really find the unicorns, like the people who can and I know at least one person who's been a creative director and can go and code JavaScript, right? And so those are really rare people, but I would think that the process orientation is more likely to move over into marketing ops than a creative bent.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, maybe I could answer that with like how I started was after college, I got an internship at a really small company, and there they needed somebody to help with Marketo nurture programs. And so that was my start in marketing operations, and I kind of fell into it on accident that way. But from a creative standpoint, like there's tools that I learned like as a teenager where I was self-taught in Premiere and After Effects, and that type of experience really gets you to pick up skills that you don't learn in school, that aren't necessarily taught to you through a traditional instructor-led program. And I think those are important qualities wherever you are in your career, whether it's right out of college or, you know, after experience in the professional world. If you begin to ask questions that pull behind the curtain a little bit, that's where I think that marketing operations professionals really grow. You know, involving yourself in strategic initiatives that are happening at the company. If there's an implementation of like a new methodology, like a serious decisions type of project, or there's a technology that's being evaluated, ask to be included in those meetings, ask some specific questions, and if you start to get involved in that stuff, that's the type of experience that you can demonstrate in an interview, that, you know, just because you don't have those skills to write down, that you're willing to learn, you're willing to really get your hands dirty and work in those areas.
Yeah, and
All
I'll
right,
just.
I know Zach has something to say. He's been holding back. What is it, Zach?
I have lots of things to say. No.
So many
So
things.
a couple of things. So I'll tack on to those points from both Michael and Akil. Like, I always joke with people about this, but I think there's some truth to this too. I was a team of one through digital marketing up through marketing operations until like 2 years ago. So that path, right, helped me kind of formulate what I liked in my career. And I didn't land a marketing ops job 8 years ago and say like, this is it, you know, like I found my calling, this is awesome. It was a digital marketing job. And then I ran just Pardot at Career Builder for 2 years. And then I was like, oh, I kind of want to get back into the creative side of thing. And I went and did demand gen at a startup. And then I was like, oh yeah, you lied to yourself. You don't like that part. You just like marketing ops, right? And stuff. I did. I don't know if I thought it was like, I don't know. I think I got caught up in the glamour of the larger picture. But A, be honest with yourself, right? And B, like, understand that you're not, how do I phrase this? Find the things that you like about what you're doing, because there is somewhere, either you can create this, or at some other company, there is a job that lets you do exactly that. Eventually. It's not going to come tomorrow a lot of times, but you'll find that path. And the other thing what I was going to lead with is that I always joke with people that I've made a career out of doing things people didn't want to do, right? And like, I think that's incredibly true for marketing operations, and that's great for everybody on this call, right? Because the opportunity is massive. And if you find that you enjoy those things, you can really find yourself a niche and do some incredible stuff. Again, sometimes it takes patience, and sometimes it takes trying a lot of things out and getting your hands dirty, as Akil said. But you can start to really formulate what becomes I think, an incredibly enriching and solid career.
I have so many questions for you guys. I could keep going. I want to make sure everyone on the call knows you can interrupt us. If you want to join in, if you have questions, you can either type them if you don't want to talk.
I think Angela had a good question. I'm not sure that we've addressed that one yet. Angela, you want to ask your question?
Sure. So I am looking on to build a team, and the recs will start getting approved now. So one of the things that's really important to me, and it may be more touchy-feely than traditional operations questions, is I really want someone that cares about what they're doing and that takes ownership in their role and can have autonomy. But the care piece, I really don't know how to even articulate it in speaking here. How would I articulate it in a job description or in questions during an interview? based on your experience.
That is a great, because I was just going to ask that question. Actually, this is a great lead in. So let's start with just the phone screen. What questions would you ask to get to that core need, that core personality that you need for this job? So do you guys have any screening questions you regularly ask that would tell you that this is a person who is going to really sink their teeth into this and just go? Do you have any questions that would let you know somebody was like that?
I mean, this is a really hard one to get to, because I do think, as we've been talking, right, I've started thinking, and I see there's some chatter on the chat, maybe addressing this a little bit, is that job descriptions in general are like really, really hard anyway, especially if you're working in a big organization where HR has some guidelines and they're using it for salary banding and all those kinds of things. So you're trying to get, that's part of, I think, why we're sort of throwing the kitchen sink into all these job descriptions. But in the reality, if you go back to the original question you asked us, what are more important characteristics? And it was all about learning, having curiosity, problem solving, do what Angela just asked. And I think one of the best ways to get at it is to ask about, we'll take an email, right? An email went out to the wrong set of people, or had a mistake, or had, this, or, for a variety, it could be any variety, like just how did that person handle that situation where things went wrong? Because invariably in this world, things go wrong. And so, I had a new person join my team a couple of years ago, and one of the things she struggled with was like just hitting the send button on an email. And I was like, look, you're going to do it. It's not the end of the world. Like, we're not curing cancer here, but things are going to go wrong somewhere along the way. And as soon as it did, I said, this is how we handle it. And I think that that ability to take that and to go dig in, understand how it happened, and try to prevent it in the future. The story like that, and how they, like, what that person did, not in general, right? I want, like, what did you do to help figure out why this went sideways? And then what did you do to try to prevent it? That's the kind of story.
I've had that question in interviews, and I've asked something similar, but let's say, sometimes you have the luxury of being the person who's doing the phone screens, but other times you don't. Other times it's HR or it's a recruiter. So what question, Zach, would you give to a recruiter to screen somebody to get to what Angela's trying to get to?
Yeah, I've had this question asked to me in the past, and it's a challenging and difficult question. And I'm going to try to phrase it properly here, but essentially it's along the lines of, tell me about a time when you fought for something that you knew was right, even though everybody else disagreed.
It happens a lot, people, if you're not in MOPs.
That's a great question.
Yeah, and that's a general version, right? And you could specify a little more for whatever happens.
I ask that every time also. That's a very critical question to ask, because you're right, that is what we do every single day. Fight for the things that we build.
Exactly. And hopefully the person can articulate the why and get into, frankly, a little bit of the emotion behind it that I think, Angela, is maybe some of what you're trying to kind of piece together, either through a screen or eventual face-to-face interview.
I do see that somebody's asked, like, how do you get past the recruiters? Yeah, I think this is actually a real challenge. I've struggled as the hiring manager with recruiters not really understanding this role. And I think part of it is job descriptions suck. Another part of it is this is just a new world, and it's a new kind of role, and there's just not a lot of, it's hard to find people, right? One. So that means there's not a lot of experience in the recruiter world, particularly in corporate recruiting. I think there are some agencies that do this now that focus on the area, and they're pretty good. They know what to look for. But if you don't have the ability to go use those third parties, it becomes a real challenge to get those recruiters to know what to look for. So typically, I know I'm having to go look at every candidate that comes through and kind of guide the recruiter on what to look for.
You're going to have to give them a very specific list of questions and things to ask. So what does somebody put on, what should somebody have on their LinkedIn profile to be found? If they're looking for a job, Are there specific things that you would want to see in their summary or in their headline or something that would indicate to you this is somebody I want to talk to? How, if you searched, would you find them? Because I don't know about you guys, but my job title has changed like 10 times in the last, 8 years. So nobody's going to find me by saying, I'm looking for somebody who has a marketing operations title for the last 5 years. Not happening. It just doesn't exist. So our job titles have changed a lot because it's such a nascent, to me, in this grand scheme of things, it's a nascent job, right? The whole thing didn't exist 10 years ago. So what should somebody put in their LinkedIn profile? If you guys were searching for somebody, what do you search for?
It's a little dependent on the job, right? Which again, you have to kind of circle back and think about your job description as the hiring manager. But for example, if I'm hiring like a marketing automation manager or even a marketing operations manager, I'm looking at the keyword level for kind of descriptors that are based around the different tools. I try to find some type of through line to KPIs or reporting or something like that takes the next level, right? Like, I'm not just looking for someone that's an admin. I'm looking for someone that can then branch back to business goals and outcomes, either in their summary or something like that. Sometimes that doesn't come through the keywords very well, and I wouldn't expect someone to necessarily have that, but that's helpful because then it helps my eye kind of direct right to that. It's, as you mentioned, like, if someone looked at my LinkedIn like 3 or 4 years ago, they might not even think I did marketing operations, right? And so you have to kind of, if you're not going to say that keyword, you need to kind of make that framework in the descriptions of the things you've built and the successes you've had that are quantifiable in your profile.
Yeah. You guys have anything to add to that, Akil?
Typically it's, marketing automation, the different platforms, all those are the kinds of keywords I'll tell a recruiter to look for when they're doing their search. Project management, if, Marketo or marketing automation doesn't pull anything up, because at the end of the day, you just need somebody who can juggle a lot of stuff and really lead a project and is driven to just take something across the finish line. That's the core of what I look for.
What about people who write articles or speak at conferences, or is that important to have somebody who is out there in the industry speaking or writing or anything like that?
I think it probably depends on what they're speaking or writing about. If they're talking about what Zach mentioned, and I think he'll too, right? Experiences of actually getting things across the finish line, or the business outcome of something that they've done, a project, then I think absolutely it's valuable. If it is specific to a certain technology, it's not going to hurt, right? It kind of goes back to the same thing, right? The certification thing. It's a good verification of that, knowing that particular technology and how to leverage it, not necessarily about the ability to apply it in a different situation or in a new place.
Yeah, I just want to say too, you guys, if you join this Slack group, anybody who registered who hasn't been on here before, there's an amazing industry group that we're all part of, and there is a channel in there called MOPs Hiring. So we have people post jobs in there. We have people post when they've been laid off. There's just this, I know we're over 1,000 people now in this industry group that we have. So, by all means, do join the Slack group, because if you want to see real life, what goes on and what we talk about, this is a great group of people to ask questions of, to learn from. I learn new stuff every day. I'm in this Slack group way too often.
I think Thomas had a good question. Thomas, if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, I actually think it was answered about how do you get past the hiring manager.
The recruiter or the hiring manager? Because you don't want to get past the hiring manager.
Sorry. How do you get past the recruiter? Because oftentimes
it's really hard. It is. It's tough, and I've seen you know, you have a lot of automated systems, and I actually, the last time I had was in a job search last year, I had a friend at Deloitte who is a recruiter who gave me a resume template that Deloitte developed to give to people to try to get them to put their resume together correctly so that it would be found by the automated systems, so it would be easy to read by a hiring manager, things like that. So there are very specific ways to set up a resume to get pulled out, to have those systems recognize you when they have all the automation in there that just weeds people out right and left who shouldn't be weeded out. So obviously it's keyword based, it's, you know, quantitative, or I mean, you've got to have your very specific things at the top of your resume, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
still, I will go back and look through resumes when I was hiring before, and I would see great people fall through the cracks because things like they had very specific college degrees in there. And I'm like, first of all, yeah, who cares if you have a philosophy degree or no degree? If you have experience, I just want somebody who's hungry, motivated, driven, and learns quickly. That's what I want.
Here, and I'll add this, and this is the best tip I can give anybody in a group like the industry Slack channel for MOPs is incredibly important here. Is the best way to get in front of somebody is to network around the ATS. And that is find somebody who's connected to that hiring manager. Sometimes it's hard to ascertain who the hiring manager is, and it takes a little bit of research. And the networks can help with that too. But if you can find somebody who's connected with the person hiring that role, and then hopefully use your network to kind of get in front of that person either directly or secondarily, that will go miles more than I think trying to guess what a computer software is trying to read. Like that's a incredible challenge, and unfortunately that's
I know, but I mean sometimes I imagine with all the people laid off right now, I mean I'm seeing resumes come in for a job that we have open that are just people throwing spaghetti at the wall, right?
Oh,
because,
totally.
Yeah, so I mean, so do have the correct keywords and things in your job description. And actually the thing I can say, you've got to create a different resume for every single job description. You better look at the description and make sure you have as much of that as possible in your resume, because it will search out keywords. We will sort of glance and look at the top, right? Right at the top, I need to see exactly at least part of what I'm looking for. We have questions all the time. We're not going to like go into depth on it on this call but people ask about salaries all the time, and they are all over the map, depending on the company, the state, and now with everybody working remotely, I'm really wondering if the salary ranges are going to change. I don't know if we can comment briefly on this. In September, I have two awesome guests that I'm not going to mention right now, but they're both people who do salary surveys. And so we will have a session in September to talk specifically about salaries for the different types of MOPS roles and sort of the ranges. So do you guys have any comments or advice, anything regarding salaries on ranges and the types of roles, or anything that you want to talk about? Nobody's willing to say anything.
I typically
Okay, let me just phrase it differently then. If somebody is a very junior person, the title has the word associate in it, which is usually a tip off that it's a junior role sometimes, right? If you're an associate, that means there's other people around you, right, that you could get mentored from. Is that true? Anyone?
Yeah.
Probably, but yeah. At least a manager.
There's a person on my team who is an associate that's on this call.
Okay. So
that describes that exactly.
Do you have any comments or advice on what people could expect salary-wise? Does it depend on the actual job, where you live, the company you're with, anything, any generalizations on salary?
I mean, I think I think the short answer to your question is, yeah, all those things matter. I think with what's going on now with all the move to more remote, more openness to remote workers and things like that, that's going to throw that a little bit more into chaos. But it's still, again, it's really hard as a hiring manager and working with recruiters to know what the right range should be. Again, it goes back to because we're really bad about writing job descriptions, and it's such a relatively new field that there's such a wide range for any one of these jobs of what it could be, that it does make it hard. So I think, if I was to be in, your shoes, I would, know what, do your own research to try to get an idea of what you think is reasonable, because then you have it sort of database, which is also a good example of how you think as well, and you're willing to put in some extra effort, and just maybe talk to people. The session in September, I'm curious as much as anybody else about what those are now, especially where they're trending.
So and obviously, would you guys be willing to hire remote even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic?
I probably, a year and a half ago, I probably would have said probably not. But also, I had an experience at Freeman where I had the people who worked for me directly were there, but then we had agencies that were all over, and it was absolutely fine, right? We can get a lot done with people remote, and I'm finding, I think there's going to be a lot more acceptance of that. I don't know how well that will work in managing people and teams. It's another reason why you really need to make sure that there's a good match from a culture standpoint and how you operate as a manager, and you as a manager, we as managers need to be really good about adjusting our style to any individual that we get on the team. That doesn't change. That's actually something that's been there for a while, and that doesn't change. It makes it maybe a little more difficult.
How about you guys, Zach or Akil?
I'll answer Zach first, and then I'll answer is kind of like where we were coming from our company. I think any job on my team can be done remotely, right? Now the person has to be able to work remote. That's important.
Yes.
And I don't want to be controversial or anything, but there are certain individuals who I think excel, and I think there are certain individuals that need some type of social or office space setting, and we're going to have to address that more in the future, right? We're still in the place where a lot of us don't have a choice one way or another, but if you can, and that's going to be a whole line of questioning in interviews coming forward too, right? It's okay, tell me about how you keep yourself driven as an individual within your home or whatever workspace you've chosen. I don't think we even really tapped into that. I haven't personally.
Some people who would get distracted or couldn't focus.
Yeah.
I personally was the only remote employee at my company, and the only reason they were willing to hire me is because I had done it before and proven that I could be productive. So, and I had two hiring managers tell me we would never have hire this type of role in two different companies, say we wouldn't hire this remotely if somebody had no experience working remotely. So it does require some, and I've had to learn I've been remote for 5 or 6 years, but I've had to learn how to be productive at home. I am one of those people who really likes the social of the office too. And I was going to New York once a month, and I would go for 10 days a month. And before that, I was working for a company in San Francisco, and I like to go once a month because I want to see the people in person that I'm working with. But I've also managed people in other countries remotely. So I had that experience coming in. And so it really depends on personality type, because some people are like squirrel. Oh, I need to go do this, or I need to do that. I mean, I have a window right next to my office here, but thankfully it looks at an alley. It's not that interesting. It's just for sunlight. So we have 9 minutes left. So I want to know burning questions that we have. Anybody?
Thomas had another really good question that I would be very interested to hear your opinion on. Thomas, if you want to share.
Was it about being
overqualified? Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody's overqualified, would you still look at them?
Absolutely. That's not a bad thing.
No, I was gonna say, I hate that term, right? Because you're either qualified or you're not.
Right.
And if you happen to have more experience, this gets back to knowing what your value is too, right? I think this is more on you as a candidate. If you think you can do the job and looks interesting, but there may be a misalignment potentially with what you think your value is versus what the salary and compensation package could be for it. And that what the reason I go into that is, as a hiring person, what I worry about is not that you're overqualified and you can't do the job. Is that, will you be engaged, and will you
Will you
always
get bored,
will you be
right?
looking for will you be looking for the next
Yeah.
thing as soon as you join, right? And that, from my perspective, is what makes it a challenge. But I'm usually the kind of person who has a very direct conversation with someone who comes in that looks overqualified, because I think I'm trying to think ahead about that.
Yeah. And in my experience, there's a series of questions or series of conversations that I've had with folks that have great experience that might be more expansive than the way the job description is written, or what the goal of that role is, right? Like, there are times where I've worked with folks either directly that would have been on my team, or I was interviewing on behalf of somebody who was hiring for a different team, is where they might have had a team and then now they're going down into a role that's, it's maybe senior but doesn't have any support people, and there's like a road to maybe getting some people on that team, but that's not going to happen here, and it could be in the future. And so the things I'm looking for is, being very clear about that, and being honest as the hiring individual. Hey, here's the situation. I see you're here, or you were here, or you have been here in your career. Do you see any issues here in the long run? And then B, and this is less direct, but it's understanding more about why the person wants that particular job at your company, right? And if they speak more to kind of the value of the company as a whole, wanting to be part of the culture and those type of things, then that, in conjunction with the answers you get on the clarity of the, hey, this role is probably not exactly what you were in before, I think you can make better assessments, right? And if those two things are kind of out of whack, and someone's clearly kind of saying like, oh, I want this role less about like the bigger picture, then that is somewhat of a red flag for me, because it's kind of like, is it about the bigger picture, or is it about kind of the specific job right now? That's kind of how I look at that.
Akil, do you have any
I
comments?
agree with what Zach and Michael said. I mean, I'm not looking for somebody who's coming into coast. I want to make sure that our expectations are in line, where they want to grow and they want to learn. That doesn't mean that, there's never going to be space for learning. There always is. But for somebody to come in with a lot of experience, that's always going to be a great thing. But on the opposite side, if you're coming in, you don't have a lot of experience, show those same soft skills. I think it's going to be evaluated evenly across the board.
So I think one of the first questions you need to ask if you feel like you're overqualified is the salary question. What's the salary range? I mean, specifically, most recruit. That's a good question. That's a good question to like save your time. If the salary range isn't even close to where you are, then just don't waste people's time. Move on. But you can ask the salary range, and people will usually give you a range. They're not going to tell. It's going to depend on experience and maybe where you live or whatever. But they will usually give you a range, and that's how you can be well qualified, but if you have certain salary expectations that they're not willing to meet, then what's the point? Don't interview and move on.
Yeah,
So,
and I'd add there, like, be very careful of kind of verbal agreements, right? If you have a salary expectation that's higher than what's being mentioned for the range, but someone kind of says, hey, but we can get you there, or something kind of non-discreet like that.
I never trust that. Don't trust the bonuses and things like that.
Be very careful.
Yeah, don't take a job based on that. Take it because you love the company and you love the people. And, to me, it's not always about jumping for a higher salary. You got to love the people. You have to love the company. And you have to love doing this job. So we've got like,
okay,
4
just
minutes.
real quick, Chelsea put a good point in the chat about that particular, and I think it's more important first to figure out would the job be something you'd be interested in as a part of where you want to take your career path before you start asking the salary question?
Right.
Because if there's no point asking the salary question if it's actually not a job.
First question you ask, right? You don't get on the phone and say, how much money does this pay? That is not what I'm talking about here, but do have it early on in the conversation for sure.
Yeah.
So you're not going through an entire interview process and getting to the very end and getting an offer that has a salary that you just were like, why? Yeah. Don't wait until the very end. It's going to happen somewhere in there. The salary conversation always comes up. We have 3 minutes. Oh, there's so much. If you, oh my goodness. If you had what's your MOPS superpower? There's a question I'm throwing out. Go.
So I come in, I have two things that I think are somewhat unusual in the MOPS world. One is I've sold before. So I think I have my lens in it has a little bit of a bent in sales. I also have done finance kind of work before, worked in the space of finance. And I think that's an underrated skill that MOPS people should have.
Anybody else? If you have a superpower or a superpower you wished you had in your role?
I think communication is very important, just the art of talking to somebody in leadership versus the developer that you're working with to build something out. Being able to, go from one style of talking to another and just being able to communicate things between those types of groups is super important and something that I've tried to work on with myself too.
We are the glue. That is true. We're the glue between all of these other teams at companies, and you have to have that skill. That's necessary. Any superpowers, Zach?
Yeah, I'd say quick learner. And they're just kind of twofold, right? Like where you can be adaptable and pick things up quick. But also, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I try to make the mistake once and not repeatedly. And I think that's a key part of learning in terms of career progression.
And I suspect all three of us are at this role. One of the challenges is decision making, right? It's really easy to get caught up in trying to get all the answers that you feel like you can make a decision, but more often than not, you have to make a decision with some amount of, unknowns and do the best you can. And then learn from anything that comes out of it, whether it's good or bad, and try to, move from
that point too, just to build on that, there's always two parts to a conversation where you're identifying the problem, but then you also have to provide a solution. Too often, and we're working with these people all day, which is they identify issues and it kind of stops there. And our job is to kind of pick that up and be able to provide solutions to them. So instead of building walls, we have to build roads between all these different groups that we work with. And if you see that sentence structure or just structure of how people talk, where they always pair those two things together, that's always going to be something I look for.
I like that quote, build roads, not walls. And on that note, I'm going to thank everybody on this session of MOPS Talk. We are out of time, but we are in the Slack channel, in the Slack group. So if you join that industry Slack group, you can keep asking questions. There are so many really smart, interesting people in there to answer your questions and chat with you. So until next time, unless you want to join the guests this afternoon at 4 o'clock my time, which we have our second session for APAC and anybody else who didn't want to get up as early as me on the West Coast. Please join us later on today if you want to see our other guests talk and probably have totally different opinions. We'll see.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll send out the recording for this later this week too.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye.